Hello, very good day to you. Welcome to the last Met Office deep dive of 2024. I'm Alex Burkill, presenter and meteorologist here at the Met Office. Thank you so much for joining me today. There is a lot of weather going on. It is a bank holiday tomorrow, but the weather is not going to keep things quiet at all. There's a lot of unsettled weather to be had, lots of strong winds, lots of heavy rain, even some snow in the forecast. And there's more unsettled weather likely to come this weekend as well. So lots for me to talk about. Thank you as always for joining me if you're a regular viewer, and if this is one of your first deep dives, then welcome. As always, if you do like anything that I've been talking about today, then do hit the like button, make sure you subscribe, and also hit the share button to share this knowledge that you've gained from this with anyone who you think might be interested. Now, a couple of things before we get going. I will be talking about what's happened as we've gone through 2024, a little look at the statistics. I'll even be having a quick glance at what's happening over some other parts of the world. But I think it's the UK where we have a lot of weather happening at the moment. So let's dive straight into that. So at the moment, well, you're no doubt aware there's a lot of wind, there's a lot of rain at the moment. Plans for New Year's Eve for Hogmanay have been cancelled because of the unsettled weather. And part of that is the heavy rain. Now, I have the satellite image behind me and the radar on from earlier on Monday, and we had some heavy rain that arrived. If I just go back, you could see we had rain pushing across Scotland as we went through the weekend, and that continued and turned even heavier as we went through Monday and into Tuesday. And we've seen more rain already this morning as well. And with that, some places, Acknagart, for example, in Scotland, has seen more than 100 millimetres of rain since midnight on Monday morning. So that's why we're seeing some impacts. That's why we issued an amber warning for some northern parts of Scotland with some really high totals. Some rivers are really close to the amount of rain that they can actually contain, and so we are seeing some flooding, some road closures. There's a lot of travel disruption, which is adding to the problems, what with it being New Year's Eve as well. As well as the rain, we do have some strong winds to watch out for. But let's have a look at what's causing all of this. And if we look at the bigger picture, and at the moment you can see the jet stream is running relatively actively across the UK. Now, how strong is the jet? It's not, I mean, we've had stronger jets, but it is fairly strong, of 140, 150 miles per hour around the UK. Because it's running across us, that's what's leading to this jet, to the unsettled weather. So we've had a number of areas of low pressure coming through already this week, and we are going to have, or we have one currently just tracking just to the north of the UK, and this is causing many problems. Yes, it's brought some heavy rain already, as I've already mentioned, and it's bringing some strong winds to many places. We've already seen gusts of around 50, 60, even close to 70 miles per hour, and they're going to get stronger as we go through tomorrow. I'll have a bit more about when we're going to see the strongest winds in a second. But it's various things going on with this system as we go through the next couple of hours. Well, really, so you can see two things. The occlusion comes over the north of this low as we drift through the end of New Year's Eve and into New Year's Day itself. I'll try and stop it around midnight because that would be semi-interesting. An hour too late, but doesn't matter. There's an occlusion coming through, so that's going to bring some more rain and something a little bit wintry, some sleet, some snow in association with that because of the change in our wind direction as that comes through. But then it's this front that's pushing its way southwards across England and Wales as we go through the next day or so. That's going to bring some more heavy rain and also some very strong winds. So whilst we're here, actually, let's just quickly look at what we're going to see temperature-wise, because the temperatures haven't been, well, not particularly low recently. But if we put our winds on and our air mass, and you can see as we go through Wednesday, as this front, this active front, clears away towards the southeast, we have much colder Arctic air coming down from the north. So whilst we are going to have some very wet, some windy, and for some of us wintry, some sleet, some snow weather through the next 24, 36 hours or so, as we go through New Year's Day, we're going to have cold Arctic air plunging down, and so things are going to turn much colder for, well, all of us really, as we go through the first few days of January. I'll come on to what happens thereafter in a little bit, but let's take a more detailed look at what we can expect across the UK as we go through the next day or so. So if I just dart ahead to New Year's Eve, sorry, it is New Year's Eve now, isn't it? But if we dart ahead towards midnight, And as you can see, you can see the occlusions brought some more persistent rain. There will be some snow mixed in over the higher ground towards the north of Scotland because of the winds coming from the north, bringing that cold Arctic air across us. Then the other thing to bear in mind is this front that I highlighted that is pushing its way southwards. That kind of stalls over parts of North Wales, northern England, and so here we are going to see some high rainfall totals building up. In between, there's something a little bit drier, some strong winds to watch out for, though these easing a little bit as we go overnight. But yes, it is going to be windy even if you don't get the wet weather. And then towards southern parts of the UK ahead of this front, yes, there are some strong winds. These winds actually strengthening as we go through Wednesday, but actually staying largely dry. So if you're watching this New Year's Eve and you're about to head out in the south, yes, largely dry. In the north, lots of showery rain around and some snow. And then this heavy rain, so some very wet weather across parts of northern England, North Wales in particular. That is going to cause some problems. With that then, we do have another number of warnings out at the moment. I won't go over them in too much detail because they are changing quite actively. And if I just go back a little bit to talk about the warnings that we have currently, and we have snow and ice and snow and rain and snow warnings across parts of Scotland, snow for the Northern Isles, and then wind warnings across more southern parts of Scotland and into northern England, then a rain warning across parts of England and Wales, northern England and Wales. And then later, as we go into tomorrow, we have a wind warning across other parts of England, more towards the south, and across central southern parts of Wales as well. And then a snow and ice warning for parts of Scotland that runs through from Wednesday morning all the way through into Thursday morning, because we have that cold Arctic air, and that's going to bring plenty of showers, perfect ingredients for some icy patches to develop. So, what do I want to talk about first in terms of the detail? Should we do the rain first? Let's have a look at what we can expect. So, the greatest cause for concern really now is, well, there are still going to be some significant impacts from the rain across parts of Scotland. They will be continuing because of how much rain we've seen recently. There will be some further flooding issues, even though the heaviest rain here has now pushed through. The heaviest rain that we're going to see through the next 12-24 hours is going to be in this area where we have that warning. If I just dart back, there we go, and that should disappear. Here we go. There we have this warning over parts of Wales and northern England, and here there's the potential for more than 100 millimetres of rain. How can I show you this? Let's have a look and see if this will work for me today. And if we go up to this one, let's do 12-hour rainfall totals. And if we just run through, if I go through, so where are we now? This is 3 o'clock. So this is kind of the next 12 hours. Where we have the reds showing up and the oranges, this is where we're going to have the highest rainfall totals in association with that front that I mentioned that will be lying and stalling across parts of northern England, North Wales, as we go through midnight and for a few hours beyond into the beginning of New Year's Day. Then that front, like I said, makes its way southwards. What do I want to show you now? Let's go to this format again. And this front is really going to be quite a potent feature as it makes its way southwards. There are going to be some squally winds on it, so it is going to be quite gusty. But actually, the strongest winds are going to be ahead of the front. And actually, you may see along this front, there's going to be something called line convection. You can notice this by this narrow band of those deeper colours, the yellows, the oranges, showing that we're going to have some intense rain coming through, albeit only for a short period of time as we go through New Year's Day. So now this line convection is caused because we actually have quite a sharp wind shear as this front comes through. Now notice the wind direction ahead of the front, coming from the southwest, and then behind the front it's coming more from the northwest or even a northerly direction. So that's a veer in the winds of more than 90 degrees as that front comes through. So that's a really sharp shear to the wind, and we have quite a steep front. So the front, if you imagine it going up through the atmosphere, it's rearward sloping, but it's not particularly sloped, it's quite sharp. And so as a result of that, and the wind shear, we have then some rapidly rising air ahead of the front. And it's this, as you know, when air rises, the moisture in the air condenses out, and that's when we get clouds. Because we have this rapidly rising air just ahead of the front, we're going to see quite a narrow band of, well, big clouds and intense rain. And so we are likely to see, as we go through tomorrow, if I just play it through, we are likely to see this narrow band of intense rain pushing its way southeastwards across the country as we go through New Year's Day, well, across England and Wales as we go through New Year's Day. Now, the intense rain's only really going to last about 15 to 20 minutes or so. That's the kind of times that you expect with line convection. But there will be some rain either side of this, and so it is going to be pretty wet for a fair period of time. Obviously, across parts of North Wales, Northern England, like I said, the front's stalling there, so going to stay wet for quite a while before. But as this front makes its way southeastwards, a bit of rain for a while, but this intense rain could cause some problems. Like I said, there will be some strong winds around. Let's have a look at those. A couple of things that we can show you with those. So if we get up our gusts graphic, if I just play this through, and let's hope that this is actually playing what I think it will. And we can see as we go through, let's skip ahead because we're already through. You can see some strong winds developing across parts of England and Wales as we go, particularly after midnight. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that we have issued a wind warning for parts of central southern England and Wales. It's valid from midnight on New Year's Day morning. So lots of people will be heading out for New Year's celebrations. It's the getting home that may be a little bit tricky for some people because of these strong winds. So do pay attention to what's going on where you are, because there could be some travel disruption. There could be some, train cancellations. There already have been lots of delays and difficulties with transport because of the unsettled weather further north. But yes, we are going to see some strong winds as we go through the early hours of New Year's Day. But what you can really see, yes, there are strong gusts. We're talking 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts inland, perhaps 65 to 75 miles per hour in more exposed spots, particularly towards the south, the southwest. Here we're likely in those coastal areas, likely to see those strong gusts coming through. But really then, you can see that change in wind direction as that front comes across. The winds then drop out really markedly. So it will still be a bit blustery, but it's not going to be anywhere near as windy as it will have been before and during that active front going across. Those winds are suddenly going to really drop out. So if I just run that through, actually I'll just play it through, and you can see as we then go through towards the afternoon, the strongest winds becoming confined just to the southeast, and then it becomes, well, not as windy. There will still be a wind coming from the north, and that's going to make it cold. I've already shown you that we have that cold Arctic air, but I'll talk more about that in a second. The other thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to our winds, well, let's look in a little bit more detail at a couple of places. Let's start in North Wales. That's not really showing what I was hoping for, so let's pick somewhere else. Aha, perfect. Let's go southern Wales. This place is a bit better. Here we go, Peterchurch. There we go, I can pronounce it, and it shows what I want it to show. You can see the winds strengthening as we go through the rest of New Year's Eve, and then through the early hours of New Year's, or overnight New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, they're starting to peak. Gusts around 50, 60, could even be stronger than this, miles per hour, but very strong. And then you can see, as that front goes through that I mentioned, the winds really drop out. Now, if I could also plot the direction in the wind on this as well, then you would also see that the wind changes direction quite sharply as that front goes through as well. So but you can really see, I mean, that's what, a 20 mile per hour drop in the wind speed during the, early tomorrow morning as the front goes through and it starts to clear away. So that's a real drop. If we pick somewhere a bit further south, let's go Southampton or South Wonston as it is, and also here you can see a real sharp drop. It takes a little bit longer, it's a little bit later on in the day that we're going to see the drop in winds because the front is gradually making its way southeastwards. But I just thought that was quite interesting, and I wanted to share with you that yes, because of that because of that shear in the wind, we are going to get that line convection, so an intense period of rain for a few minutes, 15 to 20 or so, and then the winds dropping out. Yes, there will still be some rain, but not as intense, and yes, turning much lighter. Now, a couple of other things. What do I want to show you next? Should we go through the cold that's coming across us? What can we use to see that? So if we look at our temperatures, and if we get up, that's not what I want. Let's go with this one. And if we pick a couple of places, let's try London, for example. Oh, Arsenal FC, what a nice place. Let's look at our temperatures. And like I said, started off this week, well, not particularly cold at all. A little bit mild, temperatures generally for many places in double figures through yesterday, earlier today, and across in the south as we go through into tomorrow, we're going to see temperatures peaking in double figures. But then as that Arctic air makes its way through both by day and by night, we are going to see our temperatures dropping. In the south, Thursday night into Friday, looks like it is going to be pretty cold, a widespread harsh frost. If I pick somewhere else, for example, let's head somewhere towards Dartmoor, or can we find somewhere anywhere colder? Not quite, but you can see even colder perhaps across some parts of Dartmoor. Not out of the question that we could get to negative double figures Thursday night into Friday because we have that cold Arctic air making its way further south. Now, if we pick somewhere a bit further north, over Scotland, and you can see the drop in temperatures comes that little bit earlier. Wednesday night into Thursday is looking pretty cold. Thursday, and I mean even Wednesday morning and Wednesday itself is looking cold. But yes, we're seeing that drop in temperatures even earlier because the Arctic air will have already been making its way through as we go through New Year's, early on New Year's Day. Then, if we look at this, plotting it a bit further ahead, and you can see perhaps a slight rise in temperatures maybe, but staying cold and perhaps getting even colder as we go into next week. I will talk a little bit about what we can expect next week, particularly this coming weekend, because there is potentially some severe weather still to come. But let's go back to the actual weather that's happening. I feel like I've darted over that quite quickly. So just to recap, through New Year's Eve, through the rest of New Year's Eve, and as we go through, I've gone too far. As we go towards New Year's Day, we are going to have this band of rain lying here, bringing some heavy rain here. Further north, we have that Arctic air already coming in, so there is some rain mixed in with an occlusion, some showers, but also some sleet and snow. That will then lead to icy patches across parts of Scotland as we go through into New Year's Day and into the 2nd. Further south, staying cloudier, but eventually that front pushes its way southeastwards, brings some intense rain for a short period of time, some strong winds ahead of this and on it, but then that all clears through. And then as we go overnight, Wednesday into Thursday, that cold Arctic air, lots of clear skies, frost, ice is going to become quite a problem as we go through the next couple of nights because of that Arctic air. And the winds do drop out, but we get them coming in from the north, and that is important. The direction that the winds are coming from plays an important part in where we're going to see any sleet or snow showers. Now, it's quite, with this kind of cold air, it's quite likely that any showers coming through are going to have a wintry element to them, but it's in areas exposed to that northerly wind where we're most likely to see them. So northern Scotland seeing quite a few, even some parts of Northern Ireland, but perhaps also down the eastern side of England, North Sea coastal parts could see some of those showers, and some of them could penetrate further inland, but it's most likely towards those coastal parts that you're going to see them. But as we go through Thursday, actually looks like quite a nice winter's day. We've seen so much cloud recently and so much cloud through 2024. I'll talk about that in a bit. But actually on Thursday, a decent amount of sunshine for many of us. Some showers around coastal parts, even some showers feeding down the Irish Sea. So for western parts of England and Wales, we could see some showers and they could have a wintry element to them. But actually a decent amount of sunshine. The flip of that though is then across, well, central southern parts of the UK, we keep clear skies overnight into Friday, and with that cold air and those clear skies, temperatures dropping, which is why we could see temperatures in negative double figures even in the south when we wake up on Friday morning. But further north and west here, slight change in the wind direction, slightly coming from the northwest, bringing a bit more cloud in, some outbreaks of showery rain, perhaps some sleet and snow mixed in as well, and so things turning a little bit less cold comparatively for some places in the north. It will probably still be cold, especially where there's any lying snow. Again, here we could get to negative double figures overnight Thursday into Friday, but that's less different to average for the time of year, whereas I think in the south it really is going to feel pretty raw, pretty cold first thing on Friday morning. Otherwise, as we go through Friday itself, staying largely fine and sunny towards the south, but further showery outbreaks of rain with a wintry element coming from the northwest, and these gradually making their way southwards, but not seeing a huge amount across southern parts. Then as we go into the weekend, and this is when uncertainty, as you would probably expect, increases a little bit. So likely that on Saturday, sticking with the generally fine weather towards the south, but a bit more clouds, some outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow across northern parts, and it's still going to be pretty chilly. But then you'll see there's a system that's starting to come up from the southwest. If I show you that in a different way, let's go to the bigger picture. Let's get rid of the jet stream. Let's put our rain on. Or let's not put our winds on for now. And if I just dart ahead to the weekend, and yes, we have a system that's likely to track its way up from the southwest as we go towards Sunday. If I go to the very end of my sequence that it allows, and you may notice something a little bit interesting, well, from some people's point of view, there is likely to be some sleet and snow on the northern edge of this. So if I just put on our temperature layer again, and you can see we have cold air across much of the country. I've already talked about that. Cold Arctic air coming down from the north as we go through the latter part of this week. And as this system with some warmer air entrailed within it bashes against that colder air, there's a high chance that we are going to see some sleet and snow on the lead edge of this. The uncertainty comes exactly where this system's going to track and where this boundary is going to be, where that cold air is going to hit that warmer air, that moist air, and where we're going to see the most disruptive weather. Now, the most likely setup, what we're suggesting most likely, is for the low to track just to the south or around southern parts of the UK. Now, if that comes off, then it will be across southern areas, in particular where we could see the wettest, the wintriest, is that a word? The most wintry weather with the greatest risk of some impacts from sleet and snow. There could even be some freezing rain affecting southern parts if this comes off. We're saying that's around a 45% chance likelihood that the low will track somewhere across southern parts, maybe just to the south of the UK. Meanwhile, further north, it's kind of continuation of what we saw the preceding few days. So still under the influence of a cold northerly wind, still some wintry showers around, so some sleet and snow in places exposed to that. An alternative, however, if we look at ECMWF's output, remember ECMWF is the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, and this is their most likely setup for this coming Sunday, and it has the low just a little bit further north, and with that all the unsettled weather further north. Now if this came off, that would change quite a few things. It would be widely a wet and a windy day across the country, and it would change where we're most likely to see the snow. Remember, the snow is always most likely to be, well, it's always going to be on the northern edge of this system as it comes in. And so because within the system itself, the air is quite mild, so most of it's going to be rain, but on the northern edge, there's a good chance of seeing some significant snow as we hit the colder air across the UK. And so if this comes off, the sleet snow would be mainly confined to northern parts for a time, worth bearing in mind that once we see the bulk of the rain coming through, it may just be snow for a bit before we then see more in the way of rain. But yes, the sleet snow more likely to be across northern parts. Again, if this comes off, we could see some freezing rain mixed in with this, so that could cause some problems too. The alternative is the low stays much further south than either of these setups, about a 20% chance I'd say. So I think about 45% chance that the low comes just to the south or just over southern parts of the UK, like the Met Office model wants. About 35% chance that we see something more akin to this, so the low ever so slightly further north, and that brings more widely unsettled wet and weather and keeps the snow mainly across more northern areas. And then about 20% chance that the low keeps to the south, and we just see a continuation of the cold northerly wind that we'll have had through much of the latter part of this week. So a lot to play for with this coming weekend. Quite likely that we are going to see some severe weather, and with that some impacts. So quite likely we will need some warnings. So definitely one to keep on top of for this one, particularly if you are a fan of some sleet and snow, because it's not out of the question that we see some in parts of the south. Now what happens thereafter and as we go further ahead? And actually, as we go through the first week or so of January, there's a slightly higher than average chance that we'll end up with a bit of a negative NAO. So a negative NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation. Remember, that's the contrast with looking at the North Atlantic and looking at the low pressure to the north, so around Iceland, high pressure further south around the Azores, and seeing what the difference is. And if there's a big difference between that, the high and the low, then we get a positive NAO, and that's when we get our westerlies and we get our mobile patterns and we get storms coming in from the west like we often see. Meanwhile, the flip side, what we're perhaps more likely to get as we go through the beginning part of January is a negative NAO, and that suggests kind of the setup. If I just go back to the Met Office model and put this on, kind of suggests this kind of setup with low pressure somewhere around the south, just to the south of the UK, and something a little bit more settled across more northern areas. And so I think that's generally going to be the trend as we go through the next, week or so. And so, yes, there will be some wet and windy weather around, most likely across southern parts of the UK. It could spread further north, so it doesn't mean northern areas are going to be totally dry. They won't be. They will see some wet and windy weather at times, but it just means, especially compared to average, it's more likely to be unsettled towards the south of the UK and more likely to be slightly drier towards the north with this negative NAO setup that we're likely to have as we go through the beginning part of January. We can see that in another way. If I get another chart up from ECMWF. Oh, one thing that I haven't mentioned, I talked about the uncertainty about the system that comes through this weekend. So I showed you the deterministic from ECMWF, or the most likely regime. This is the spread. So you can see there's a relatively large spread. Here's the UK, in case you can't make it out, but here's the spread in the position of those systems that come through on Sunday. And so you can see quite a large variety on exactly how far north and south it can be. And so that's why there's that uncertainty that I mentioned. Sorry, I meant to show you that earlier. But if we go back, and another thing that we can look at from ECMWF are the plumes. Now, the top one is looking at the temperature at 850 hectopascals up. So that's around 1,500 meters above the surface, above ground level, above sea level, sorry. And this is looking at the temperature. And this is the plumes for London. And what you can see is, as I've already mentioned, as we go into New Year's Day and more towards the 2nd, we see that cold Arctic air, so temperatures really dropping down. And then as we go towards the weekend, well, this is where we get some major spread. There's likely to be that system coming up from the southwest, bringing that warm air, hitting the cold air, bringing some snow, bringing some wind and rain. And so that's why we're quite likely to see temperatures rising in the south, but no guarantee. There is still the possibility that it stays to the south of us, in which case we stick with that cold air across many parts of the country. If we look further along, and regardless whether or not we see a system coming through or not, it looks like temperatures are then going to again drop down a bit or stay on the colder side depending on what happens. And then later on, towards the latter part of next week, it looks like we could see a repeat. So we're kind of seeing, we could see another system coming through across the southwest, and that could again lift the temperatures. It could again bring some unsettled weather. If you look at rainfall towards this, on this bottom chart, this shows rainfall or total precipitation. And so, yes, there's the potential that we could see another swathe. And this again goes in line with this idea of a negative NAO, in as much as, yes, we could see some swathes of wet weather coming in at times, particularly across southern parts, which is why I picked London behind me here. Right, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about with the forecast. So a couple of things, like I mentioned, lots of hazards possible this coming weekend, freezing rain. Before that, though, even with the slightly more settled weather that we're going to have towards the latter part of this week, here's Thursday, for example, worth bearing in mind that a lot of the ground is going to be really saturated. There's going to be a lot of wetness around, and so with the low temperatures that we're expecting, ice could be quite a problem as well. It's quite a clean air mass at the moment, so I'm not expecting much mist and fog, lots of cloud, not much cloud around, but actually as we go through into the weekend, that's when we start to get something, a little bit more likely to see some mist and fog around. So not that much fog as we go through Wednesday, Thursday, because the air mass is quite clean, if you will. But the risk of fog, freezing fog, increases as we go into the weekend. And then the other unsettled weather that I mentioned as well. Oh my gosh, I think I need a breather. But there's more that I would like to talk to you about. So it is New Year's Eve. We've talked about all the unsettled weather that we're going to have. It's fairly fitting for 2024 to go out with some pretty wet and windy weather, even some snow. But let's look at what 2024 brought Now, we haven't got our full set of stats. They will come out in a couple of days' time, aiming to get those out on the 2nd, so do keep on top of those if you're interested in what happened. But a couple of headlines that we can take away from 2024, and it may surprise you. Definitely didn't really feel like it from most people's point of view, but 2024 was a fair bit warmer than average. Here's our map showing mean temperature across the UK compared to average, and you can see most places are in the pinky colour, so most places a fair bit, and some places significantly warmer than average. So yes, although you may be thinking it didn't really feel like it, it was actually a fair bit warmer than average. If we look at our rainfall, and actually as a whole, if you bear with me a second, as a whole, the rainfall was slightly above average, but not everywhere. Across many parts of the UK, it was significantly, across England, particularly central southern parts, Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Gloucestershire, for example, well above average. But other places, Northern Ireland and many parts of Scotland, actually had quite a bit less rain than average through the whole year. And then the other thing, and I think everyone will have noticed this, and this seems to be the big theme from 2024, it's been pretty gloomy. Lots of grey skies, sunshine hasn't been in great supply, and on the whole, it looks like it's been significantly cloudier and less sunny than average across pretty much all of the UK. Just some eastern parts have had a bit more sunshine. Far north of Scotland as well has had a bit more sunshine than average. But generally, for most of us, it has been cloudier. And I think most of us have noticed that as well. Then the last thing that I wanted to leave you with was a little look at something that's happening over in South America at the moment. I'm going to get rid of the jet. I'm going to put rain on instead. And across southern parts of South America, southern parts of Argentina around the Santa Cruz province, there's actually an active front that's stalling here as we go through the rest of Tuesday. And this is actually quite an arid part of the country, so it doesn't usually see a huge amount of rain. But because this front is stalling here, and it is quite intense, we're going to see some high rainfall totals building up. We're only talking around 50 to 100 millimetres of rain, but that's a substantial amount for this part of the country. And it could be coming in just 12 to 18 hours or so. So that's a fair amount of rain in a relatively short period. Worth bearing in mind, 50 to 100 millimetres, that's around 2 to 3 times their average monthly rainfall. So a significant amount of rain for this part in Argentina, which is why they are likely to see some flooding and some disruption, some travel disruption, etc. because of this wet weather, even though it doesn't perhaps seem that much rain comparatively to, well, some parts of the UK. Actually, in this area, this part of the world, it could cause some major problems. Right, thank you so much for joining me for this week's deep dive, the last of 2024. That's everything that I wanted to cover. As always, if you would like to ask any questions or leave any comments, then please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with anyone you think may be interested. There won't be a 10-day trend tomorrow because it's New Year's Day, but we will have a weekend update on Thursday, and that will be an important one with the potential for that severe, possibly wintry weather to come through on Sunday. I will also be updating our 14-day outlook, which is available on our app later on this evening. And Honor and I will be here doing our Weather Studio live on Friday, which again could be a big one if we do have that unsettled weather that is quite potentially going to come through this weekend. So lots to come as we go through the beginning of January. Now, thank you again. Thank you for watching everything as we've been through 2024, and I will see you in the new year. Bye-bye.